Today's video will focus on button layout and the use of the Carefusion ReVel ventilator. It weighs in at 9.5 pounds. That's without any mounting brackets that would be used in the aircraft or critical care ambulances. The vent is approved to be used in patients who are greater than 5 kilograms. We use two different circuits. A 15mm circuit, which is approved for patients weighing between 5 kilograms and less than or equal to 20 kilograms, and a 22mm circuit, which is approved for patients who are greater than 20 kilograms. When you look at the ventilator, you can see there's three distinct panels: a control panel, an alarm panel, and a pulse oximetry panel. The pulse oximetry panel is disabled and not used. Patients will be monitored via the life pack for SpO2 and end-tidal CO2. The control panel is the area where we will set our breath rate, our inspiratory time, our tidal volume, pressure control, pressure support, and PEEP. You'll also be able to see if the patient takes their own spontaneous breath by watching the patient effort light illuminate with each patient initiated breath. You'll also be able to set your FiO2 level as well as breath mode and breath type. In the alarm panel area, you'll be able to set your low peak pressure, your high pressure limit, and your low FiO2 limit. There's a non-invasive positive pressure ventilatory light that will illuminate when in the NPPV mode, as well as your low minute volume alarm. At the bottom of the ventilator is the on-off button, an alarm check so you can test the alarm volume, a display to see what power source you are using. You can lock the control panel with this button here. There's a manual breath button which will allow you to initiate a breath at any point during the ventilation process. The maneuvers button is a button that we'll talk about a little later during the video. This one is used to check for plateau pressure and auto PEEP. And then finally, we have the silence reset button. On the side of the ventilator, we have the charging port. This tends to be a fairly sensitive piece, so please be careful when charging the ventilator by plugging it into an external power. There's only really one way to plug this in, and there are some very small pins inside the plug, so that's why you need to be careful. If you try to force it in, you could break the pin off, and then you'll be unable to charge the ventilator. These inlets are this one is for an SpO2 connector, FiO2 connector, which we do not use the ventilator to check for, so these are inactive at the time. Over here, we have 4 different types of connectors. The large round connector is for the vent tubing itself. You're going to slide the vent tubing onto that adapter, and you're going to push slightly so you feel slight resistance. You don't want to force it on because you could crack the tubing itself. It is thin plastic. You could crack it, and then you'll wind up with multiple leak alarms. Okay, the other 3 connectors can only be connected to a specific connector. This will not fit on this one or this one, just as this connector will not fit on this one. it can only fit on this one. For these two, when you seat, you want to twist counterclockwise, place it onto the adapter and release it. It will seat itself, and then you just want to give it a slight turn until as soon as you feel resistance, stop. You don't want to over tighten these. So we're going to turn about 45 degrees counterclockwise, seat it on, release it, and then just slightly tighten. This one slides straight on. It's just a nipple type adapter. On the other side of the vent, we have the removable battery. Okay, you can check your battery power with the unit turned off simply by pressing the button, and it'll give you a display of how much battery power is left by the number of bars. If you need to exchange the battery, it's a two-step process to remove the battery. First, you press up on this switch right here. It will partially eject the battery. There's a safety mechanism underneath on the battery itself. You need to push this in to remove the battery all the way. And then when you replace with a fresh battery, you just slide it all the way in until you hear the two clicks. Next, there's an internal battery inside the unit that is charged by the charging port. That internal battery allows you to continue the operation of the ventilator while on a patient. You can remove the battery if it needs to be replaced. While the unit is operating, you can take the battery out and replace it with a fresh battery. The unit will alarm that it's then on it. It'll say T battery on the display. It shouldn't take more than 10 seconds to replace the battery. Okay, over here we have our high pressure oxygen connection. You can connect either a high pressure oxygen hose to a high pressure oxygen port to deliver oxygen high pressure to the ventilator, or you can use low pressure via a normal oxygen regulator, a wall regulator, by attaching a green oxygen Christmas tree, screwing it onto this, and then attaching oxygen tubing between the regulator and the end of the Christmas tree. The ventilator will automatically supplement for pressure. If you're using a low pressure oxygen source, it will supplement the additional pressure with the internal motor to create the additional pressure needed to operate the vent at whatever settings you've put in. This port here is to connect a nebulizer to provide inline nebulized medications to the patient. This is a air filter. It's very important to not get this wet. If it does get wet, you need to take the unit out of service, and it needs to go to biomed for the whole unit to be checked to make sure water hasn't reached the internal components. This over here is the air intake. It pulls outside air in to help cool the unit. So at this point, prior to placing a patient onto the ventilator, you need to perform a circuit test each time you open up a new circuit to place on a patient. So what we're going to do is go ahead. We're going to press the power button. unit will alarm a couple of times. You'll see it says external power lost. It's operating on battery power, so we're going to hit the yellow silence reset button until we see same patient will pop up. This will allow you to either use previously set settings, so whatever the settings were on the ventilator at the last time it was turned off, you can pull back up. If you turn the control knob down here, new patient, which would allow us to wipe out the previous settings and begin on a fresh patient. And what we want to do is go to vent check. So we're going to go ahead and press the select button. It's going to tell us to remove my patient. We're going to press the silence button. Next it's going to say patient ID, which we don't want, language no, units, button test, we want circuit test. We're going to go ahead and select that. It's going to tell us to remove patient. We're going to hit select, and it's telling us to approve the Y, which we will do. And you can see it says passed. If it said failed, then we would hit the exit button, go back to circuit test, and retry a second time on the same circuit. If the circuit fails a second time, you disconnect the circuit, you get a new circuit, and you perform a circuit test again. If the unit gives a failed test on a second circuit, you take the unit out of service, and you get a new ventilator to use for that assignment. Alright, so we see that our circuit is passed, so we're going to hit exit. I'm going to hit exit twice because we're going to go back out, and we're going to choose a new patient. I'm going to press select. We're going to have patient ID, patient size. I'm going to hit select. 3 sizes that we can choose from: adult, pediatric, or infant. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go start just by selecting adult. The next choice is it asks if the patient is intubated, or do we want to use non-invasive positive pressure ventilation. We're going to choose intubated for this demonstration, and the unit will default to a breath rate of 12, inspiratory time of 1, a tidal volume of 500, and PEEP of 6, sensitivity of 2, our FiO2 is showing up as 21, and then the breath mode defaults to assist control, and the breath type defaults to volume. You can see down here under the alarms, our low peak pressure limit is 10, and our high pressure limit is at 40, and our low minute volume is 3. And you'll notice the pressure control and pressure support values are dimmed. What that means is these are the values that are in use by the current mode and breath type. These values do not affect the operation of the ventilator. So if I want to adjust anything on the ventilator, what I need to do is press the button directly underneath the value that I want to change. So let's say I want to change the breath rate from 12 to 14. So I press the button, you'll notice it stays highlighted, and all the other control values are now dimmed out. When I operate the twist knob, you can see that I'm changing that value only. So I change it to 14, but if you don't depress the button again to lock it in, the ventilator will, after a couple of seconds, will default back to the previous setting. Okay, you can see it's defaulted back to a respiratory rate of 12. So now I'm going to go back, press the button. I'm going to change it to 14, and then I'm going to press to lock it back in. So as soon as you make a change, the ventilator will immediately institute that change to the patient. So breath rate, if I change the tidal volume up or down, the next breath in the cycle will be at the new setting. So let's just turn this down a little bit. I'm going to say 450, and then I press it. So now the patient's going to receive 14 breaths per minute. It's a 1 second inspiratory time, tidal volume of 450, a PEEP of 6, 21% O2, and a sensitivity of 2. Okay, and then because we're using a test lung, units tend to alarm a little bit more because they don't have the same pliability as tissue. So now we talked before about plateau pressures and auto PEEP. So we're going to come down here to the maneuvers button, which is located down here. And what I want to do is I'm going to press and hold. So you can see the P-plat is 36. So if I want to see what my auto PEEP is, okay, I'm going to move this to a pressure. Okay, and now you notice the tidal volume has become dimmed. Pressure control is now highlighted. I'm going to put this back up. So PEEP of 5, which is pretty standard. Okay, so I'm going to change this back to a rate of 14. Our pressure control is 15, and we'll set this to 6. Okay, we're going to hold down the maneuvers button again. Now you notice it says E-hold for the expiratory hold. And we're going to hold it in. So our auto PEEP is 0. Switch this back up to volume mode. Okay, I'm going to drop this down a little bit. So you're going to notice up here, let's turn the PEEP down. Okay, so you notice up here we've got a couple of orange lights as well as the green bar that moves up and down. So the first orange bar matches what our low peak pressure is set to, and the other matches what our high pressure limit is set to. And then this bar is a visual representation of the breath being given and where it ends. So breath starts at 0, and then the green light over here shows you where the pressure of where the breath is cutting off. Okay, in the screen, if I turn the knob, you can see I can manually switch through all of the different parameters that the vent will display. Peak inspiratory pressure, our V peak, our inspiratory expiratory time, so 1 to every 3.3, mean arterial pressure. So you can switch and hone in on one particular as needed, or you can just allow the unit will cycle through all of the different parameters, showing each one for a few seconds at a time. So that's a brief overview of the Carefusion ReVel ventilator, the buttons, the exterior of the unit. Thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for additional videos on the specifics of each ventilatory mode. Thank you.